Alice in Borderland is a Japanese thriller slash sci-fi slash horror-ish suspense drama, streaming currently on Netflix that, if you ask me, is destined to be a cult hit. Like, if you haven't already watched it or heard of it, give it 10 years, and if the quality of this show keeps up season to season, I expect it will have a significant and vocal following the same way something like the movie Battle Royale does. I mean, I know I'll be buying a t-shirt. For me, this is the freshest, most exciting, most compelling, most entertaining, most engaging show I have seen in a long time. And yet, months after its release, there are seemingly very few people, at least in the English-speaking world, talking about it. And that is baffling to me, because this thing just screams hit. It has crowd pleaser written all over it. It is just so watchable, so bingeable, so tense and gripping. It ticks all of the boxes to be something that could be this huge phenomenon. To the point that I think its only barrier to a more general audience over here is just the fact that it isn't in English. And I actually think that if it were an English production, there wouldn't be a soul with a Netflix account that wasn't at least aware of it. I'm not basing these claims on nothing either. Because if you look at countries more used to watching subtitled or dubbed media, it's made Netflix's top 10 in Malaysia, Hong Kong, the Philippines, Singapore, Taiwan, Thailand, Germany, France, Portugal, Austria, Greece. It's crazy. The rest of the world rightfully seems to love it. And yet here in the UK and over in America, as far as I'm aware, it never reached that top 10 title status. So I'm here now to hopefully right some of that wrong and, fingers crossed, convince at least some of you to give this show a chance. Adapted from the manga of the same name, this show follows protagonist Arisu, a young jobless 24-year-old who spends most of his time playing video games and hanging out with his somewhat equally disenfranchised friends. Choto, a timid IT technician who finds himself financially supporting his mother when she gets in with a cult, and Karube, a rough around the edges but caring deep down bartender in something of a bit of a punchy love triangle with a girl he works with and their boss. One day, while goofing off on the streets of Shibuya, the three find themselves being chased by the police after almost causing a traffic accident. Taking refuge and hiding in a subway bathroom, they seem to have been caught when someone bangs on the cubicle door. However, that's when suddenly the lights go out, the banging stops, and the world goes eerily silent. The three friends leave the cubicle to investigate, and what follows is one suspenseful and unbroken 4-minute shot that sees them emerge in a suddenly abandoned Tokyo and ends on an incredible closing image of the famously always busy Shibuya crossing, completely desolate, save for our three characters. As the three explore further, it really seems like all hope is lost. Everyone they know, everyone they ever loved, vanished in an instant. Buildings and highways left completely deserted. It's really strikingly shot, with large wide-angled views of the city truly selling the magnitude of the sudden and complete isolation, framing our characters like ants in an empty and vast concrete labyrinth. And when paired with the brilliant sound design of their echoey shouts and footsteps, the tense building soundtrack, and the occasional ominous call of a crow, everything comes together to paint such a vivid picture of this eerie, almost otherworldly level of loneliness. Honestly, it's goosebumps-inducing stuff. This show has some excellent directing. Of course, this is by no means the last of our friends' problems. As nightfall comes and they find themselves no closer to any conclusions as to what the hell is going on, the trio are suddenly basked in the sinister glow of a bright digital screen overlooking Shibuya, text and voiceover announcing that the game is about to start. Following a series of signs, they find themselves entering a mysterious building, where they are guided toward a set of phones, which tell them to wait for the challenge to begin and explain to them that this game's difficulty will be the 3 of clubs, whatever the hell that means. It turns out they are not the only ones who have fallen down this surreal rabbit hole, as it isn't long before another more veteran contestant named Shibuki enters the scene, and this is where we get into the real meat of the plot. Shibuki explains that, for unknown reasons, they have all found themselves unwilling participants in a death game, and that once a game has started, there's no turning back. You either play the game, survive its challenges, and make it out the other end, or this is your last stop. And after completing your first game, you'll be granted a visa, basically a permission allowing you to stay in this world. However, it's a permission that's on a timer that slowly ticks down and can only be topped up by winning at more of these dangerous games. If your timer hits 0, then you'll be ejected. Violently. This forces anyone in this world to keep taking part in the life-threatening acts, dancing to the beat of some unseen force's twisted desires. In that sense, the show is like this super unique amalgamation of all of the best parts of the death game subgenre. It's part Battle Royale, part Saw, part Cube, but it's also kind of the Promised Neverland in the way that it's these three friends thrown into this unpredictable battle of wits and life or death situations. And of course, it's also Alice in Wonderland as these characters fall down this rabbit hole into a surreal reality they can't seem to escape from. It's an incredible hook that immediately crafts an enigmatic mystery and sets up a scenario where there's constantly stakes. There's always a ticking clock, always reason for our protagonist to be forced into a variety of horrific situations as pit stops between their attempts to unravel the reasons as to why and how they're even here in the first place. And there's never a point, at least for me, where this puzzle stops being compelling. It feels perfectly paced, the world building slowly introducing new elements that expand on the complexity of this reality, but never at a rate that feels like an over-explainy lore overload, as a lot of manga-based properties are often prone to having. It's incredibly well plotted. The story never just pulls a concept out of nowhere, everything is just a natural expansion of previously established ideas. And these things build upon themselves little by little, slowly opening up the narrative to grander concepts. For example, we learn quite quickly things like how the phones and visas work or the meaning of the card difficulty rating, but by the time that season 1 wraps, there's such a significant evolution from that first episode that now this universe has like a whole internal political system and loads of new and interesting characters with incredibly dynamic interweaving relationships who've also found themselves stuck in this nightmare scenario. And it's crazy to think of the places that initial drip feed of information manages to build and expand to. Everything is so calculated and deliberate. There's a lot of foreshadowing that not only helps wrap the world in a consistent internal logic, but also gives huge weight to the big moments when they come. An obvious example of this that won't spoil too much comes in the explanation of the card difficulty. It's told to us early on, around episode 2 I think, that the number represents how hard the game you're going to play is about to be, and the card face symbol represents the theme. Spades are games of strength, clubs are team battles, diamonds are logic based, but perhaps most terrifying of all, we are warned, is the heart game, which is a game of betrayal and is not to be taken lightly. This small amount of information is fed early on so that when the time comes where those little red symbols do show up on a game card, there's a genuine, tangible, sinking feeling in your gut as you worry for these characters. And of course, that feeling doesn't just come from the strong pacing and plotting. You can set up as many elaborate death games as you want, like you're some kind of evil Twilight Zone version of Takeshi's Castle with a thirst for blood, but that doesn't mean a thing if you can't make us care. However, in Alice in Borderland, characters are not faceless contestants on some murder game show. A problem I have with things like, say, Saw, or The Belko Experiment, or The Condemned, or many of the other countless entries into this death game subgenre is that a lot of the times the people within these films are not the focus. The concept is the focus. There are like 8 Saw movies, and besides the killer, I can't remember a single character from literally any of them. They're just numbers for the body count. But Alice in Borderland made me care. Even though it doesn't waste any time in getting to the gory, tense stuff, it still manages, due to its great directing, acting, and character writing, to really make me give a shit about the people whose lives are at risk. I remember all of the characters in that show. Our 3 leads are immediately distinct in their personalities and share a believably charming and heartwarming friendship. And as more characters are introduced that run the gamut from grounded, down-to-earth, believable people to shifty weirdos who are clearly planning something to full-on batshit ridiculous anime villains, one thing remains completely consistent. There isn't a soul amongst them who's forgettable. Alice in Borderland paints a rich tapestry of all kinds of personalities, and every recurring character is fully fleshed out with their own motivations, history, and interpersonal relationship. No one feels like they shouldn't be there, and every performance in the show sees the actors giving it their all, which, when paired with the fantastic directing, creates a show that seamlessly and dynamically jumps between everything from high-stakes action to nail-biting suspense to emotional gut punches to even totally over-the-top ridiculousness when the time calls for it. But somehow, despite the fact that this show can make you shed tears in one episode, only to in another make you cackle with glee as a big muscle man punches a tiger square in the face, it somehow never feels tonally at odds with itself. It's kind of baffling that it pulls it all off, really. And it does all this while juggling some pretty heavy themes. At face value, you've obviously got discussions around things like friendship and community, as well as social disenfranchisement, and there's a fair amount of psychological trauma discussed and social issues explored in different characters' backstories. On a bit of a deeper level, we can say there's some criticisms of hierarchical structures, as the political systems that develop in this world, a world that, may I remind you, literally runs purely on survival and whose population exists in incredibly small numbers, still manages to essentially create a class system, with those on top reaping the benefits of the labour of those below them. And also, it's arguable that the whole thing may be at least somewhat a metaphor for the immigrant experience. I mean, it is interesting that the items the characters get that allow them to stay in this world are referred to as visas, after all, and they have to jump through increasingly difficult and dangerous hoops in order to acquire them on the command of a cold, distant and unseen leadership who provide no explanation as to why they must cater to these difficult demands. Then there's the idea that if you don't have a visa or it expires, then this could mean certain death for you, which is an unfortunate reality for a lot of refugees. Maybe I'm looking too much into it with this one. I couldn't find anything online about the author or if he's made comment on this or if this is relevant in any way to his life and politics. The dude doesn't even have a Wikipedia page, but it's certainly interesting to think about. Also, there's this one image in the manga where the visa clearly refers to its holder as an immigrant, so maybe I'm onto something? It's a compelling thought. Maybe watch it and see if you find anything in this reading. I will say though, the show's not entirely perfect. There is a moment that's a little too anime in the first episode that you have to kind of get past, where a character works out the solution to a game by pulling some out of nowhere Sherlock style mind palace solutions out of his arse. But thankfully this only happens once, and all the other games are grounded in logic that actually will have keen-eyed viewers working out the solutions alongside the characters. It's a show that can make you feel pretty smart sometimes. Other than that, the CGI is a little wonky in places, although having said that, this only applies to certain moments. Like the tiger looks a little off, but the set extension work used to create the abandoned city is flawless. I actually thought for a second that they somehow managed to empty Shibuya Crossing in the middle of the day, which is absurd for any budget, but that's genuinely how good it looks. And my only real complaint outside of these couple of issues, and I've got to be careful how I phrase this so that I don't unnecessarily spoil something, is that there was a chance for some excellent representation of a minority group within this story. And while I do think the story the actual narrative gets to tell in regards to this group is a really positive one, and is a story that doesn't make their status as a minority the central defining feature of their character, or engage too much in that minority group's suffering, as stories depicting certain groups are often unfortunately prone to do, there perhaps could have been even stronger representation with alternative casting. That's not to say that the person playing the role I'm talking about doesn't do a fantastic job. They're actually brilliant and probably by far my favourite character, but it's just something to note, and to be honest, I don't know how many high profile actors in Japan fall into this minority group, so it may have been incredibly difficult casting for this role. I don't know what the situation is with that stuff, and I'm not going to pretend that I do. It may have genuinely been they worked with what they could, and to be fair to the person in the role again, they do a fantastic job. That last point might have been a little bit unclear, but it'll make sense when you watch it. Those small issues aside though, I can't remember for the life of me the last time I was this instantly enamored and taken in by something. It's not that it's the kind of thing that's going to win a whole bunch of critical acclaim and award recognition. It's not that kind of show. But what it is so damn pitch perfect at exactly what it sets out to do, that it is the very definition of one more episode more-ish. It's an absorbing, entertaining good time with fantastic directing, characters, and performances all wrapped up in a slick, tightly paced, emotionally engaging, and neon-drizzled stylish package. I honestly can't recommend it enough. It's just so much fun, and I cannot wait for season 2, so check it out. Also, even if you're still not interested, check it out anyway, because I kind of need this thing to be a massive smash hit, because I want to read the manga and watch the 3-episode OVA, but there's currently no official English translation of either of those things, so yeah, make this shit do numbers and become so popular that those things happen. Please. Anyway, I've been Dan Drambles. Thank you all for watching. Please remember to subscribe to my Only Dans at the red button below. Also, don't forget to like and maybe comment with something you think I should check out. And who knows? It could be a future episode in this series. Also, if you'd like to support me and see your own name in these credits now appearing on screen, as well as gain access to a bunch of cool stuff like Q&A videos, original short films, unused scripts, active private Discord channel, and much more, then check out my Patreon at the link in the description. Currently, there's an offer on where the first 100 patrons get permanent access to all the content put out on higher tiers for as little as $1. And at the time of writing, there's 37 of those slots left, so if that sounds like something that'd interest you, then check it out. Also, finally, I realized I forgot to do special shoutouts on the last video, so apologies for that. This episode, I would like to give a special thanks to my patrons, Elizabeth Ann Hanley, Scotty Boy, Emily Kirk, and Sarah Harger. Thank you all, and I'll see you in the next video.